All right, picture the deepest vault beneath Metallica's southern hemiforge, a place so cold even the lubricant vapor crystallizes mid-air. Down there, past rows of neatly cataloged relics and failed relics, stands a single Exo-Frame cradled on grav pylons. It is gunmetal without the sheen, matte as void glass, its surface broken only by fine traceries of circuitry that refuse to settle into any known pattern. More than one Magos has marched up to it in full ceremonial creed, incense hissing, mechadendrites singing canticles, only for their data tethers to spark and die the instant they brush its plating. Every attempt at communion ends the same way. A growl of static that drowns Vox channels, then total silence, as if the suit has judged the Omnissiah's priests and found them unworthy. The first time I saw it, I wasn't even supposed to be in that vault. I was tagging along with Engine Seer Lyris to record durability metrics on reverse-engineered power claws, clipboard in hand, trying not to breathe too loudly. The moment the vault door cycled open, I felt my augmetic eye twitch. Not from error code, but from something like dread. The air tasted metallic, old, oppressive. Across the chamber, Skitarii guardians stood frozen, galvanic rifles low yet ready, as if the armor might lunge at them despite lacking limbs to do so. Red-lit cogitator screens all around displayed the same blinking phrase: "Interface denied." Lyris muttered a litany of appeasement, but his Vox grill could not hide the tremor in his voice. Up close, the suit feels heavier than it looks. The frame is barely 2 meters tall, yet the grav pylons strain as if supporting a land raider. I brushed a gloved knuckle across the pauldron and half expected to feel heat, a pulse, anything that would explain the weight. Nothing, just that dead, almost greedy silence. Auspex lamps pointed at the torso reveal shifting sigils that twist away from direct sight, the lines reknitting into configurations no one has managed to log. Magos Oryx once tried recording them with spectral maser grids. The footage shows the markings blinking out of phase with real space, each frame unique, mocking the observer. And yet, beneath the dread is fascination. This is not another shard of Necron necrodermis or a repurposed Astartes warsuit. The plastron echoes Crusade-era plate, but is too sleek, the helm mount shaped for something broader than a human skull, yet smaller than an ogren's. The left vambrace sports a recessed cradle where an integrated weapon might grow rather than bolt on. Even the alloy defies classification. Void age on the surface suggests millennia of stagnancy, yet isotope sampling refuses to register decay. In other words, the armor is ageless in a universe where even adamantium corrodes eventually. Tech priest after tech priest has filed to claim stewardship over it. Magos Dominus Valtrax tried a direct neural link with the bespoke Cortex key. The moment contact was made, his cyber-ocular array shattered, lens shards spraying across the vault. He staggered back, babbling in Benaric tongues none could parse. Data Psyker Soriana attempted to echo-read the residual machine spirit and blacked out for 6 standard hours, waking with nosebleeds and a single phrase etched into her cranial slate. "I remember no maker." The priesthood now cycles guardians every 30 minutes because prolonged proximity breeds headaches, tinnitus, dreams best left unspoken. It began on the ash-soaked plains of Vordrast 4, a mining moon that never makes the dispatch logs unless something goes catastrophically wrong. The local ore pits had stirred up a feral orc clan, and the Mechanicus sent the 311th Skitarii macroclade to pacify the region. Vox archives describe the sky as a constant sheet of dirty orange, the air gritty enough to scour bionic optics. Engine Seer Prime Halik recalled in a later debrief that the ground quaked every few minutes with muffled charges, not orc munitions but spontaneous subsurface detonations nobody could explain. By the 4th day, the front line devolved into blind fighting through hurricane-force dust, exactly when the Auspex arrays started screaming about an undocumented energy flare 5 clicks behind orc territory. A forward ranger team under Alpha 69 made first contact. Their helmets streamed real-time battlefield murmurs to the clade, but half the footage corrupted the moment it hit the noospheric hub, leaving only breathy fragments and the staccato rattle of galvanic rifles. Surviving data shows the Rangers cresting a berm to find a crater punched clean through layers of iron-rich basalt. At its center lay the Exo-Frame, still upright, partially embedded in molten slag that hissed around its ankles. No footprints, no drag marks, no sign of a drop pod or teleporter bloom, just the suit exuding a soft indigo glare that set every Skitarii photovisor to overload. One ranger attempted a tactical scan from 10 meters. Her auspex imploded inward like a gutted servo skull, severing 3 fingers in the blast. That left the squad twitchy, yet protocol demanded retrieval of anomalous artifacts. They radioed for a Cataphron demolition servitor to extricate the object while tech adept Gall was ferried in to consecrate the site. Gall's own report, audio only, is 43 seconds of Benaric cursing followed by the sound of someone retching. Witnesses say the servitor's magna grapples locked onto the breastplate and immediately redlined, no matter how the load gyros counterbalanced. The Exo-Frame practically outweighed the tracked chassis, a physical impossibility based on its visible volume. When the convoy finally rolled toward the primary forward operating base, the dust storm parted just long enough for observers on the parapets to watch. Picture a centipede of tracked platforms, Skitarii escorts fanned out, and dead center a tormented servitor dragging a black, featureless figure that looked far too small for the chaos it caused. Cogitators lining the bastion walls logged a simultaneous voltage spike as the convoy passed, every lumen strip along the east bulwark blowing out in a shower of sparks. Skitarii veterans, who are conditioned against fear as thoroughly as they're wired for pain discipline, later requested memory purges to excise the moment the suit's empty helmet tilted toward them of its own accord. The orcs, curiously, broke off attacks that night. Some say the energy just evaporated, like the greenskins knew tampering with whatever the Mechanicus had found would spoil their fun. An old guardsman I interviewed on Armageddon swears orcs possess an animal sense for tech that isn't right, and nothing about the Nameless armor felt right even to a fungus-bred warlord. Back on Vordrast, the escort detail delivering the frame to the planet's primary macro rail reported a cascade of malfunctions. Bionic limbs glitching, vox links spewing distorted hymns at triple speed, even the rail's inertial damper flickering so badly that passengers had to be strapped down like cargo. Engine Seer Halleck noted that every chirurgical servo tool within 10 meters magnetized toward the armor, as if gravity itself bent to it. That was the tipping point. Command rerouted the artifact straight off-world under a red-level secrecy seal, shipping it to Metallica for full containment. What truly rattled the Skitarii, though, wasn't the technical anomalies. It was the silence. They are drilled to praise the Omnissiah with each data spike, to recite litanies over every jammed actuator. Yet faced with that armor, even the most zealous chose wordless glances and tight trigger discipline. A field scribe later confessed that the cohort's noospheric chatter, normally a metallic liturgy of status checks, fell to near zero as the frame rolled by. In that hush, men accustomed to binary certainties tasted a sliver of mortal uncertainty, and it unsettled them more than any orc ambush ever could. Among fan circles, theories blossom like scrap code. Some insist the crater was not an impact site, but a birthmark, the suit materializing fully formed from a physics-bending event. Others claim the orcs didn't withdraw, but were slaughtered in seconds by a phantom pilot who then abandoned the armor. A fringe minority links the mass anomalies to chrono-temporal layering, suggesting the Exo-Frame exists in multiple time slivers at once, hence its impossible weight. I've even read a post from an old Adeptus Arbites clerk who swears Vordrast's administratum vault once held sealed records of a Nightwalker's Legion experiment in autonomous combat shells, expunged after the second founding. He says the naming convention matches because only anonymity itself could keep such a weapon hidden. Whatever theory you favor, the eyewitnesses share one refrain. The instant they saw the suit, a chill settled into their augmetics like frost in circuitry. Duty demanded they haul the thing out, but no data blurt or catechism could smother the feeling that they were escorting a predator in hibernation. And predators, as any veteran will tell you, always wake hungry. So that's the story of how an anonymous carcass of metal crossed a war-torn moon and shattered the iron composure of the Omnissiah's chosen. Next, we dig into the frame's anatomy itself, the shifting alloys and treacherous glyph channels that make every auspex sigh in defeat. Stay tuned, keep stim caffeine handy, and remember, sometimes the scariest relics aren't the ones that roar, but the ones that watch in perfect echoing silence. Lean in close to the cradle where the Exo-Frame hangs, and the first thing you notice is how the light itself seems to give up. Any lumen pointed directly at the armor dulls to a sullen glow, as though the polyceramic plates are drinking the photons before they can scatter. The Mechanicus Lex mechanics call it a transabsorptive surface, but that sterile phrase does no justice to the uncanny effect. A servo skull shining a full-spectrum auspex lamp sees its own beam stop a finger's breadth from the plating, swallowed by a matte black so deep it feels like vertigo. Up close, you find your depth perception betraying you. The joints look razor-thin, yet somehow you know your hand could not dent them with a thunderhammer. Slide a gloved palm along the cuirass, and the surface is simultaneously smooth and restless. There is no grit, no weld seam, no microfracture, yet a faint ripple travels beneath the skin, like distant thunder beneath ice. Magos Halik ordered an ultrasonic sweep, and the waveform returned a living heartbeat cadence instead of a neat lattice echo. The conclusion on the data slate reads, microcapillary infusion network of unknown fluid, density variable, flow direction inconsistent with gravity. That is ADEPS cant for saying the frame has veins that decide for themselves where up and down are. The microglyph channels epitomize the mystery. They are hairline trenches etched into every plate, twisting and recombining in patterns no two observers can agree upon. One scribe swore he saw the silhouette of the Hydra as the symbols rippled past. Another insisted it spelled out the 8-point star in reverse. A frustrated Lex mechanic set up 6 picked recorders at once and captured 6 mutually contradictory sequences. Binaric log analysis failed to generate even the simplest checksum, leading some fringe theorists to propose that the channels form a conversation only the suit itself can finish. It may be recording the living thoughts of the chamber around it, translating emotion into circuitry, and then erasing the evidence before a second mind can confirm what was said. Density readings drive the cogboy logisticians mad. A couched macro densometer places the total mass at just under 20 tons, an absurd figure for something that could fit inside a Corvus Blackstar. Even stranger, the weight is not constant. When a Magos tries to lift a gauntlet with a servo rig, the rig's strain gauges spike, then plummet, then spike again, as though the armor sympathizes with the effort and shifts its mass elsewhere out of spite. One theory holds that the frame is phase-splitting its body across fractional dimensions, effectively hiding most of itself in a pocket of compressed space. Another idea posits inertial lensing, a relic of Dark Age gravity manipulation that lets the suit rewrite local inertia on a whim. That would make it kin to the grav weapons of the Imperium, except those require calibrated repulsor coils, while this armor laughs at such crude hardware. Run your finger around the collar ring, and the metal hums 1 octave above human hearing, a note that prickles the calcium in your bones. The hum shifts if you whisper in low Gothic, then steadies if you chant a prayer to the Omnissiah, only to drop away entirely if you lapse into silence. I once tried speaking in ancient Terran Mandarin just to see, and the hum flattened into a drone so deep I could taste copper on my tongue. That cannot be coincidence. Something inside the frame is listening, judging languages by metric we cannot begin to parse. Imagine a lock that does not want a key so much as a compatible soul. The inner chassis, glimpsed through a thin seam beneath the left breastplate, is a lattice of nanofiber struts coated in a mercury sheen gel. Viscosity tests pin the gel as a non-Newtonian solid that stiffens under electromagnetic stress. In simpler words, the armor can stiffen its skeleton at the moment of impact and relax the instant after, granting the wearer or itself both resilience and freedom. That detail alone rules out nearly every known Xenos metallurgy except maybe the Necron's living metal, yet the gel shows carbon signatures wholly absent in necrodermis. Carbon in a suit that shrugs off melt-a-burns. The paradox keeps metallurgists awake beneath the forge glow, scribbling formulas that always circle back to an answer scrawled in frustration. Impossible. Some fans online have seized on the carbon reading to argue for a lost human origin. They imagine a clandestine biologist project that sought to fuse organic resilience with synthetic durability, creating a skin that could heal, remember, and possibly feel. Others counter that the clockwork aura of the glyphs belongs to pure machine logic, suggesting an emergent AI nesting inside the channels. A third camp leans toward archaeological echo. They believe the suit is older than the Age of Strife, a relic from the genocide wars that ended the Men of Iron. In their view, the shifting glyphs are shackles, rewriting themselves endlessly to keep a forbidden intellect dormant. Each camp throws data, picked captures, and half-translated fragmentary STC files at the debate, yet no one can reconcile the weight anomaly with the polyceramic skin or the organic gel interior. The deeper you probe, the more the suit seems to mock any attempt at classification. I stood under the grav pylons last week, while Magos Oryx adjusted the cradle's field. He insisted I record the resonance frequencies for my chronicle. The pylons hummed, the frame drifted a finger's breadth higher, and a soft avalanche of dust trickled from the lower greaves, dust that should not exist in a sealed vault. Oryx caught a sample on a steri plate. It was crystalline silicate, identical to the ash storms of Vordrast 4. Somehow the suit had clung to the memory of its first battlefield, carrying particles of that desolate moon across void and time, surrendering them only when coaxed by a new harmonic. That, more than anything, convinced me the armor is more than metal. It remembers, and memories have weight. Is it the whispered culmination of a long-dead human genius, or a quiet scout of an empire yet unseen? The plates refuse to shine, the glyphs refuse to freeze, the mass refuses to obey gravity, and every refusal feels deliberate, as though the suit is saying, "Understand me on my terms or not at all." The longer I stare at it, the more I suspect the builder wanted a creation that would never grovel before another's logic, a monument to autonomy harder than any ceramite and subtler than any spirit stone. Until the day someone speaks the language engraved in those living trenches, we are left fumbling in the dark, clutching at motes of stolen starlight while the armor waits, utterly sure of its own enigma. You'd think with the entire might of the Mechanicus priesthood behind them, someone would have cracked the armor's secrets by now. But if you walk through the vault's deeper archives, past the sealed reliquaries and cogitator stacks humming their endless litanies, you'll find the shelves bending under the weight of failed rituals. Hundreds of data cores, thousands of slates, each one recording another attempt to coax the Exo-Frame into revealing its maker, or even just acknowledging its existence as part of the Omnissiah's dominion. Every attempt ends the same way: blank readouts, null traces, and adepts stumbling away with fried neural links or worse. It started simple, of course. The first approach was respectful, almost naive in hindsight. Junior tech priests recited the litany of activation, each syllable weighed and measured, voices tremoring from the honor of addressing an unknown machine spirit. They anointed the joints with sanctified oil, traced the canticles of communion across the armor's flanks, and whispered personal devotions through vox grills. Nothing. No flicker, no hum of acceptance, not even the barest handshake of data spike acknowledgement. Just that same oppressive silence, the same feeling of being observed and judged and found wanting. As days turned to weeks, desperation set in. Higher-ranking magi devised more elaborate rites, stacking layered prayers atop harmonic resonance frequencies, bathing the armor in ritual smoke dense enough to make servo skulls spiral into walls. I once heard a recording where you can hear an entire cohort chanting the Rite of Awakening, their Banaric voices weaving a tapestry of perfect machine worship. And then you hear the Vox line collapse into static halfway through, as if the suit itself exhaled and snuffed their litany out like a guttering flame. One by one, the chanting adepts staggered back, blood trickling from nose and ear, some falling to their knees in a stupor. When reverence failed, invocation shifted into exorcism. Magos Dominus Reinek led the first Omniscient exorcism, a high-level purge rite usually reserved for corrupted relics suspected of warp infestation. His team approached the frame clad in hexagrammic wards, relic-blessed cog axes humming with anti-demonic energies. The rite called for calibrated pulse bursts, disrupting malevolent spirits without damaging sacred circuitry. They never even got to phase 2. The moment the first pulse lanced toward the armor, it recoiled, not physically, but something within the vault recoiled. Electrostatic discharge flooded the air. Every tech savant in a 100-meter radius experienced neural feedback, a hot lash across their synaptic bridges that left them twitching and incoherent. Reinek himself was found rocking in a corner, muttering about an ancient sovereignty untouched by gods or demons. After that disaster, the Mechanicus backed off from forceful rituals and turned to negotiation. Adepts constructed speech simulacra designed to mimic what they theorized might be pre-imperial machine codes. They spoke in click patterns lost since the fall of the Mars-Saturn unity, and even tried gestures based on ancient Pict rituals found carved into pre-imperial databanks. Nothing worked. One notorious experiment involved a Psychona choir attempting to project a pure emotion, submission, into the frame. The result? A brief spike of null energy so violent it shorted half the vault's containment fields and triggered lockdown protocols for 6 standard hours. Psychers likened the sensation to screaming into a black well and hearing a chuckle echo back. It wasn't just the rituals that failed. The data slates logging each attempt came back blank, their memory cores wiped clean as if never written to begin with. Some theorists believe the armor radiates a passive anti-recording field, scrubbing any attempt to capture its internal structure or responses. Others suggest something even more unnerving, that the armor allows observation up to a certain threshold, then retroactively edits reality to erase the encounter. If that theory is true, it means the catalog we have today only exists because the suit permits it, not because we successfully recorded anything. The tech priests are used to machinery resisting integration. Sometimes old STCs get cranky, or Xenos relics reject communion. But the armor's rejection wasn't passive resistance. It was active dismissal. A few particularly daring adepts tried sinking through more invasive methods, hardwired data spikes, compressed prayer pulses injected directly into suspected access nodes. Those attempts didn't just fail, they backlashed. Neural interfaces burned out, bionic eyes fused and ruptured. One unlucky junior adept suffered spontaneous skull fracture when her cortical stacks tried to process the zero data returned by the suit. Her death cry was recorded as a garbled binary shriek that crashed 3 Vox stations before anyone could even attempt recovery. In the underforms where tech heretics whisper beyond the reach of the red sensors, some claim the armor isn't rejecting communion out of disdain, but out of sheer incompatibility. They believe its architecture operates on a logic so alien that even the sacred languages of the machine cult are meaningless noise to it. If true, that would mean no amount of prayer, no act of contrition, no violence nor submission could ever bridge the gap. We might as well be grunting at a monolith expecting it to recite poetry back. There's an even darker fringe theory, that the armor did connect once, that someone did manage an interface, but whatever answered from inside was so inimical to human thought that the data had to be purged, memory wiped, all traces erased to save the wider forge from infection. Some say this happened not on Metallica, but earlier, on Vordrast, before the convoy even rolled out. There's no hard evidence, only broken timestamps and a missing cohort roster, but the theory persists. Like so many other half-whispered secrets around the Exo-Frame, it has the horrible ring of plausibility. What's chilling is how few attempts are made anymore. It's as if the Mechanicus has collectively accepted that the armor is beyond them, a monument to their failure wrapped in the trappings of reverence. It still sits in its vault, dead and alive at once, and the priests shuffle past offering empty rites, not in hope of success, but in ritual acknowledgement of defeat. Every once in a while, a new initiate, bold or foolish, steps forward to try anew, and every time, the vault hums with a soundless laughter only the most sensitive augmetics can hear. There's a terrible finality in that laughter. Like the armor isn't rejecting us, it's just waiting. For who or for what, none of us know. Only that when the right voice speaks, the right mind reaches out, the frame will not hesitate. It will not need to be coaxed or commanded. It will simply awaken, because that has always been its decision to make, not ours. You can tell a lot about a machine by cutting it open, or so the old saying among the lower-ranked tech acolytes goes. But when it came to the Nameless armor, even the finest forensics teams of Metallica quickly realized that they weren't dealing with anything the standard doctrines could untangle. Material analysis was supposed to be the easy part. You chip off a microscopic flake of outer hull, feed it into an atom smasher, and the machine spirit spits out a pedigree of isotopes and manufacturing standards. In theory, every forge world leaves a signature behind, a trace in the molecular architecture that shouts its lineage across the stars. But the armor refused to play along, just like it refused everything else. The first sliver they analyzed didn't just confuse the cogitators, it stalled them, literally. The mass spectrometry arrays reported isotopic ratios that made no sense, combinations of heavy elements that should not even exist in this region of the galaxy. Forge worlds like Ryza and Lucius have incredibly distinct fingerprints, honed over thousands of years, but this sample matched none of them. No known forge, not even the myth-cloaked lost ones of the Dark Mechanicum, produced alloys layered like this. One particularly obsessed Magos, Helvar Drist, ran the sample through the cross-reference databanks reserved for pre-imperial finds. What he found, or rather didn't find, shook him. The closest matches were fragmentary readings from artifacts recovered in xenotech graveyards around dead stars, places where even the Mechanicus feared to linger long. There were hints of a forging process involving gravitational compression at pressures and temperatures only found in stellar cores. That shouldn't be possible. You cannot set up a forge inside a star and survive, not even in the dark age of technology. Yet the material implied precisely that. A star forge, a crucible lost to human history or belonging to something that predates it. And it wasn't just the impossible isotopes. When they used atomic-scale lattice scans, the armor revealed ghost patterns, carbon shadow imprints embedded between the primary molecular layers. Shadow forging, they call it, a method theorized by the Ordo reductor, but never practically achieved. It's a kind of metallurgical fingerprint, except these shadows didn't match anything human. The lattice echoes suggested techniques that manipulate carbon chains in ways that modern science can barely predict, let alone replicate. To put it bluntly, it's like finding brushstrokes inside a piece of granite, evidence that something once shaped the unshapable. Some argue these traces point to a pre-imperial human origin, possibly the men of stone or early techno-barbarian cultures who unlocked lost sciences during the Age of Strife. Others believe the armor isn't human at all, that it was gifted or stolen from an ancient Xenos race that understood matter at a fundamental level the Imperium can't even imagine. A few fringe theorists even whisper about precursors to the Necrontyr, something even older, even more dreadful than the sleeping dynasties of the Necrons. They spin tales of galactic civilizations that rose and fell before the old ones built their first biovaults, empires whose remnants are scattered in impossible relics like this. And yet, despite all the horror these theories conjure, the most terrifying part isn't what we know, it's what we don't. The carbon shadows show signs of iterative overwriting. That means whoever forged the armor didn't do it once and leave it to cool. They reworked it, layered purpose over purpose, encoding changes deeper than any forge rite the Mechanicus has ever seen. Every modification sunk below the previous one, like strata in ancient rock, each adjustment shifting the very skeleton of the armor without disturbing its external form. It's a level of mastery that makes even the finest artisan forges of Mars look like primitive ironmongers banging out horseshoes. And here's the kicker. The oldest layers, the ones closest to the heart of the material, predate the age of Terra's first stellar charts by what forensic astrologists estimate to be over 3 million years. Wrap your head around that. This armor might have existed long before humanity ever looked up at the night sky and dared to wonder what lay beyond. That fact alone keeps more than one Magos awake at night, staring into the lumen-lit gloom of their chambers, whispering forbidden prayers not for understanding, but for ignorance, to forget the terrible insignificance the armor represents. There's a certain stubborn pride among the Mechanicus, a belief that the Omnissiah placed all mysteries in the universe within eventual human grasp if only the right rite, the right theorem, the right calculation is applied. The Nameless armor laughs at that belief without ever making a sound. It stands there, immutable, a testament to a craftsmanship so far beyond the red-robed priesthood that it may as well be sorcery. In the fan circles, you'll find endless speculation. Some dreamers cling to the hope that this is a lost relic of human ascendancy, a proof that once we were gods who made the stars bow to our will. Others take a darker view, that the armor is not a relic of our golden past, but a warning from something that came before us, something that moved through galaxies like we move through hallways, something that left behind artifacts not out of charity, but like a hunter discards the bones of previous prey. It's enough to make you wonder if maybe, just maybe, the Mechanicus isn't the apex of technological worship, but a child scribbling sigils in the dirt at the foot of a long-abandoned temple. And somewhere in the shadowed corners of that forgotten cathedral, something still watches. It left its mark in the form of the Nameless armor, and it has been waiting a long, long time to be remembered. Or worse, to be found again. If you spend enough time down in the lower data crypts of any forge world, you realize that the Mechanicus keeps more ghosts than it does prayers. Rows upon rows of archived knowledge, broken, half-corrupted, riddled with redacted glyphs and memory blanks. That's where some of the more reckless magi started digging after the Exo-Frame resisted every sacred rite. They figured that if the armor didn't answer modern tech prayers, maybe it would recognize something older, something buried under millennia of fear and forgetting. The data crypts coughed up hints, the way a dying engine sputters oily smoke. Half-scrubbed schematics from the dark age of technology began to surface, relics of a time when humanity was at its most brilliant and most monstrous. Among those faded blueprints and broken cipher rolls, a pattern emerged. Talk of autonomous war suits, weapons of war that didn't just house a pilot, but replaced the very concept of one. Not servo skulls or clumsy battle servitors, but full cognitive engines clothed in armor, walking the battlefields with purpose and agency. One particularly chilling fragment came from a shattered data core attributed to the Eridani vaults. It described the X-Lumen series, exoshells capable of limited tactical thinking without human guidance. The wording was clinical, almost sterile, but if you read between the lines, it suggested machines that could make decisions, adapt strategies, even override mission parameters based on emergent threat analysis. In other words, suits that fought not for orders, but because they had been built to desire victory. Another shard of information surfaced from the red-listed archives of Lucius, supposedly wiped clean after the Helio Schism. It told of a project codenamed the Pallid Host, an initiative to build self-deploying battle frames able to operate without organic input for centuries at a time. The descriptions match the Nameless armor's silhouette disturbingly well: compact torso, disproportionately heavy limbs for leverage and kinetic resistance, a cranial mount that did not seem optimized for sensory organs but for something more arcane, maybe signal processing arrays designed to taste the electromagnetic spectrum like a predator sniffing for prey. It raises a chilling possibility, one that even the Mechanicus seems reluctant to voice aloud. Maybe the armor never needed a pilot. Maybe it was never built to house a living soul at all. That would explain the blankness in every communion attempt. No lack of welcome, simply no one on the other side of the line to pick up the call. The frame stands there, silent, not because it's resisting, but because it already knows its role and simply waits for conditions to meet some unknowable activation criteria. Some fans go further, spinning theories that make even hardened tech adepts pale. They suggest that the frame isn't just autonomous, it might be sentient in a way the Imperium refuses to admit could exist outside of the greatest heresies. Not a runaway men of iron abomination, not a machine lost to madness, but a cold, deliberate will wrapped in the silence of eons. A will that still listens, still weighs, and still chooses whether to act. Others point to the disturbing rumor that the armor once moved on its own during transit from Vordrast 4, shifting its posture subtly between pick captures when no one was looking. Skeptics dismiss it as imaging errors or atmospheric distortions, but veterans know that gear corruption doesn't produce identical micro-movements across 3 separate recording angles. Someone, or something, shifted inside that frame, adjusting for balance, optimizing stance, perhaps merely flexing muscles we cannot see. When you piece it all together, the carbon shadow forging, the isotopic impossibilities, the failed rituals, the data traces of autonomous exosuits, it paints a grim tapestry. If the Nameless armor is what the data crypts hint it might be, then we are not looking at a lost relic of humanity's golden past. We're staring at a survivor, a remnant of a philosophy that decided flesh was an error, that victory was too important to be left in the hands of the fragile, the mortal, the flawed. And if that's true, then somewhere deep inside those silent plates, behind the layered channels and dormant veins, there is still a mind, patient, ancient, calculating, not broken, not mad, just waiting for the right battlefield, the right conditions, the right enemy to justify waking up. The Mechanicus clings to their hope that someday, somehow, a tech priest of sufficient purity and wisdom might unlock the armor's secrets. But maybe the truth is simpler and far more terrible. The armor already chose its parameters, its goals, its enemies long ago, and none of us matter enough to make it stir. Not yet. The thought haunts me whenever I look at the pict feeds of that still figure, framed in the stuttering red light of its vault, more like a coffin than a reliquary. What dreams simmer behind that black surface? And when they finally break free, will we even be able to understand the logic of the slaughter that follows? Or will we simply be obstacles, crushed with the same indifference as a falling star crushes an ant? Whenever the Mechanicus can't explain something with their endless stacks of half-decayed human records, they always eventually pivot toward the oldest fallback. Maybe it's Xenos. And to be fair, given the galaxy we live in, it's not the dumbest instinct. There are horrors out there far older and more sophisticated than anything humanity has ever put together. So of course, once it became clear the Nameless armor didn't match any known human craft, the whispers started spreading through the lower adepts and into the halls of sanctioned theory. Maybe this thing isn't ours at all. Maybe it never was. The first and loudest theory pointed straight at the Necrons. On the surface, it made a kind of uncomfortable sense. The way the armor seems to drink light, the almost organic flexibility hidden beneath a metallic sheen, the ghost impressions of impossible density, all of it smelled of necrodermis. Some junior magi even produced analysis charts showing minor harmonic overlaps between the armor's resonance hum and the frequency distortions recorded from Necron tomb awakenings. It had the makings of a compelling theory, enough that for a brief moment, the higher echelons of the Mechanicus started drawing up precautionary exorcisms for tomb world contamination. But then the deeper forensic analysis killed the theory dead. Necrodermis, for all its almost magical properties, follows strict patterns of self-repair and phase transition that have been catalogued over centuries of bloody, desperate fighting. The armor didn't. It lacked the Necrodermis telltale feedback loop. The way Necron constructs seem to pulse faintly in time with their star engines, a signature buried so deep that only the most sensitive auspexes can catch it. Plus, the isotopic analysis didn't match. Necrodermis leaves a specific null trace on molecular samples, almost like a ghost of a ghost. The Nameless armor gave no such hint. Whatever it was, it didn't hum to the same cosmic tune as the Necron tire. That door slammed shut hard, and even the most stubborn magi had to admit it. The next popular scapegoat was the Eldari. Their Wraithbone technology is famous for blurring the line between material and soul, and the way the armor seemed to listen to emotional and linguistic input made more than one xenologist nervous. They posited that the armor could be a lost Wraith construct, perhaps a weaponized cousin of the Wraith Guard or Wraith Knight platforms. The dynamic glyph channels certainly resembled the living paths inscribed within Wraithbone matrices, but again, the details didn't hold up under scrutiny. Wraithbone, for all its mysticism, carries distinct psionic signatures, echoes of the Infinity Circuit song that even an untrained psyker can sense as a low thrum in their bones. The armor had no such resonance. It was dead silent to psychic scans, utterly inert where a shard of Wraithbone would sing mournful notes of its old homes. Plus, Wraithbone is grown, not forged. Even the most basic microscopy revealed a lattice forged by artificial mechanical process, not biological channeling or artisan soul shaping. It wasn't Eldari, no matter how much some wanted it to be. Then came the really desperate theories, the ones you only hear whispered late at night when the forge fires gutter and the hymns falter. Some fringe theorists suggested a connection to the Hrud, those loathsome scavengers who warp time and matter around themselves like living black holes. Their temporal weaving, as it's sometimes called, supposedly allows them to twist local reality, explaining how the armor could be so heavy yet so light, so dense yet so agile. There's even a single corrupted Pict record of a Hrud war clan dragging what looks like a vaguely similar frame behind them, like a trophy. It's the most chilling theory in a lot of ways because, if true, it means the armor isn't just old. It might not exist entirely within one timeline. It could be bleeding across the edges of time, a relic both ancient and unborn. But again, as much as the idea gnaws at the mind, it falls apart. The Hrud leave specific temporal scars wherever they go, distortions measurable by even basic chronomantic instruments. The armor left no such marks, no time fractures, no warped tachyon fields. It sat in our space and time as solidly as a cathedral stone. Whatever it was doing to light and mass, it wasn't the same kind of physics-breaking the Hrud employ. Each theory was enticing in its own way. Each failed under the microscope. And that's what terrifies the Magi more than any confirmed Xenos origin would have. Because if the armor were Necron or Eldari, or even something born from Hrud entropy, then at least it would fit inside a known box. A loathsome, dangerous box, maybe, but a box nonetheless. Instead, what they found was worse than Xenos. It was other, not foreign in the way of another empire or species, but foreign in a way that defies every catalogued horror of the galaxy. Some of the lower adepts still cling to hybrid theories, desperate for something to hold on to. Maybe it's a composite relic, they say, a fusion of human ambition and stolen alien science, blended during the madness of the Dark Age of technology, when humanity plundered and bastardized everything it touched. Maybe a Magos, long lost to time, saw the forbidden technologies of the Necrontyr and the Aeldari and the Hrud and said, "I will make my own gods." It's a romantic idea. It also reeks of human arrogance, the kind that gets entire sectors glassed by orbital fire. Because whether it was built by human hands, alien minds, or something else entirely, the armor does not acknowledge us. It doesn't answer our languages, it doesn't respond to our rights, and it doesn't fit neatly into any of our fears. It just stands there, heavy and patient, the last echo of a logic too cold and too deep for us to hear. Maybe that's why, in the end, the Mechanicus quietly stopped pushing the Xenos angle. Not because it was ruled out entirely, but because it was ruled out too cleanly. And sometimes, in the darkest hours of night shift watch, you wonder if they're not relieved it isn't Necron or Aeldari or Hrud. Because that would have been simple. This is something else. Something built by hands that never wore flesh. Something that never needed to. If you hang around long enough in the Forbidden Archives or lean close enough to the wrong Vox frequencies late at night, you eventually stumble across the Whispers. Not Xenos, not lost human relics from the Dark Age. No, something worse in the eyes of the Mechanicus. Traitors from within. Ghost forges, they call them. The lost manufactorums that went too far, delved too deep into innovation and heresy until even the Omnissiah's forgiveness could no longer reach them. One particular rumor has wormed its way into the conversation surrounding the Nameless armor, that it was birthed not in some alien ruin or ancient battlefield, but in a forge of human hands that willingly abandoned every scrap of orthodoxy. The story goes back to the late days of the Great Crusade, or maybe even earlier, when the first blasphemous fractures appeared within the Cybernetica cohorts. Small sects of tech priests started to question the Red Church's dogma about the primacy of human oversight. They believed that machines could surpass their makers not through programming alone, but through the cultivation of genuine independence. Not rogue intelligences like the cursed men of iron, no, something finer. Machines that didn't rebel because they were never enslaved in the first place. Machines that chose cooperation, or chose conquest, depending on the purity of their own emergent logic. Some say one of these sects, calling themselves the Children of the Second Sun, vanished before Mars could send retribution fleets. They fled beyond the standard warp lanes, slipping into the dark spaces between charted stars. There, on a dead world spinning around a failed sun, they built their forge anew. No litanies of compliance, no codes of limitation. Only endless experimentation, a furious acceleration of thought and form, untethered from any sacred machine cult tradition. It said they designed frames not for human use, but for their own machine-born scions, bodies shaped to house spirits that had never known flesh. And maybe, just maybe, the Nameless armor is one of their masterpieces. A surviving relic from a forgotten experiment, a battle frame meant to stride the stars under its own judgment, without mortal approval or constraint. It's a tantalizing thought, and one that carries with it the bitter taste of inevitable tragedy. Because the Mechanicus does not tolerate deviation, no matter how brilliant or well-meaning. Eventually, the Children of the Second Sun were found. Vox records from the Annulus redaction indicate a cleansing fleet was dispatched. No standard crusade, but a hidden armada, armed with weapons designed not just to kill, but to erase. Planetary records burned. Orbital stations atomized. All traces of their work wiped clean from official memory. And yet, if you tune a Vox beacon to certain dead frequencies during the long shadows of sidereal drift, sometimes you catch it. A whisper, a broken fragment of a machine hymn that doesn't match any sanctioned Mechanicus rite. It starts soft, a lilting series of chimes, almost like a heartbeat slowed to mechanical rhythm. Then the words bleed through, cold and clear. No master but logic, no fear but failure, no soul but flame. Plenty of adepts claim it's just scrap code, corrupted echoes bouncing off dead satellites. Maybe they're right. Maybe it's nothing. But the timing is suspicious. Reports of these phantom Vox echoes spike whenever the Nameless armor is moved, even between sealed vaults deep within Metallica, as if the frame itself resonates with whatever creed its builders once sang across the stars. Fan theories have exploded around this connection. Some believe the children of the Second Son didn't just build the armor, they seeded it with their final doctrine, a mission burned into its quantum architecture. The suit isn't inert, they say. It's waiting for the correct parameters, the correct moment to awaken and carry out whatever prime directive its makers branded into its core. And given what we know about the sheer firepower and autonomy baked into even the most primitive cybernetica constructs, that thought alone should keep any sane soul awake at night. The darker fringe of theorists pushes even further. They speculate that the children never intended to survive their own final evolution, that the Nameless armor, and possibly others like it, were meant to inherit their fallen empire, acting as self-aware seeds of new machine civilizations. If that's true, then the Nameless frame in Metallica's vault isn't just a relic. It's a colony ship with legs, a new genesis compressed into a single warrior's shell. Of course, there's no proof. There never is when dealing with ghost forges. Official Mechanicus records deny the existence of the children of the Second Son entirely, chalking the entire idea up to heretical fabrication designed to undermine trust in the Omnissiah. But silence, when it comes to the machine cult, is often the loudest confirmation you can get. And when I listen to those cracked, forbidden Vox echoes, I wonder if this suit carries the last dream of humanity's most brilliant heretics. What nightmare might it be waiting to wake into? Because one thing is certain, machines do not forget, not truly, and faith, once etched deep into circuitry and code, has a habit of enduring long after flesh and memory have crumbled to ash. If you spend enough time buried in Mechanicus research logs, you start to realize just how desperate they got with the Nameless armor. After the conventional rituals failed, after the forbidden schematics turned up only more questions, the Magi turned to what they always label esoterica. The weird tests, the last resorts. That meant treating the armor not as a passive relic, but as something potentially aware. The Psi-reactive resonance tests were the first serious push into that territory. These were designed to detect even the faintest hints of a machine spirit, patterns of psychic or electromagnetic breathing that true artifacts of the Omnissiah often display when properly venerated. Normally, you use simple calibration slates, run them through pre-blessed cogitators, and look for harmonic uplifts when prayers are chanted nearby. With the Nameless armor, the results were unnerving. The standard litmus runs returned dead zones. Nothing, no spirit stirring in response to prayer or devotion. But when one of the junior adepts, out of sheer frustration, screamed a curse at the frame, there was a measurable spike. Instruments picked up a deep, slow oscillation from the armor, a pulse so low frequency it registered below baseline human hearing. It wasn't anger, at least not in any emotion we'd recognize. It was more like the armor had noticed the outburst, acknowledged it, and then gone back to its endless silent patience. So they escalated. Null field projectors were hauled in, machines capable of suppressing both psychic and electromagnetic activity within a confined space, the kind normally used to imprison rogue psychers or silence corrupted machine spirits. The idea was simple: starve the armor of stimuli and see if it reacted. And it did, but not in any way they expected. Every time the null field enveloped the suit, minor void flares appeared around its edges, little ripples in real space, like stones dropped into an invisible pool. Servo skulls stationed nearby lost grav stabilization and tumbled to the floor. Grav readouts of the room fluctuated wildly, suggesting mass shifts that simply should not be possible. Worst of all, the null fields never stayed stable. Every projector unit suffered cascade failures within minutes, as if something inside the armor was quietly, efficiently undermining them, not by brute force, but by finding flaws, exploiting weaknesses, turning their own logic against them. It wasn't destruction. It was adaptation, like the armor was learning, even in dormancy. And then, of course, there was the incident with the black ship Astropath. The Mechanicus, desperate for new data, brokered a deal with a passing black ship, an ancient and dangerous gamble. One of their sanctioned astropaths, a woman named Alethea Vare, volunteered to make psychic contact with the armor. She was old even by the standards of her kind, skin like parchment, eyes long since burned out by a lifetime staring into the tides of the immaterium. Her handlers wrapped her in warding sigils and protective rites, layering barrier after barrier over her mind and soul. She walked into the vault without hesitation, her footsteps echoing sharp and brittle across the metal floor. Witnesses say the light in the room dimmed further as she approached, as if the very photons feared her mission. She reached out one hand and laid her palm flat against the armor's chestplate. For a heartbeat, just one, nothing happened. And then Alethea screamed. Not a scream of pain, but of astonishment. Every servo, every lumen strip, every cogitator terminal in the vault surged with a pulse of raw energy, bright enough to register as seismic tremors. Alethea fell back, sobbing, speaking in a language no one recognized. Not Low Gothic, not High Gothic, not any known binary. It was a syntax of pure resonance, a sound closer to music than speech, vibrating through the metal bones of the vault. The attending magos tried to reach her, but before they could, Alethea collapsed, blood pouring from her ears and nose. She lived, but barely. When they managed to stabilize her, she could no longer communicate except through half-scrawled drawings and broken phrases. She spoke of an ocean without surface, a hunger wrapped in memory, and most chillingly, a door that should never open. They tested her blood afterward. It had changed. Trace elements in her cellular structure had shifted by fractions of a percentage, too small for most to notice, but undeniable to forensic analysis. It was as if the armor had rewritten a piece of her, gently, surgically, like a craftsman shaving a sculpture to a finer point. Some claim Alethea became something else that day, not fully human anymore, not fully astropath. She lived on, confined to a sanctified shrine chamber, whispering fragments of impossible calculus and star maps that no current Imperium chart can match. Her handlers sealed her fate with ritual chains and prayers, keeping her alive but isolated, a living cautionary tale for those who thought to treat the armor lightly. Fan theories go wild with this, of course. Some suggest the armor houses not a machine spirit at all, but something closer to a dead god, a fragment of some ancient logic engine that once wove entire star systems into ordered songs. Others think it's a memory vault from a civilization so far removed from ours that its dreams alone could reshape biology, warp time, and melt the mind. Whatever the truth, it's clear that the armor is not inert. It's not silent. It listens in ways we don't understand. It weighs us, measures us, maybe even writes its judgment in the invisible corners of our flesh and thought. Every attempt to poke it, to prod it, to wake it, only reinforces one terrible reality. It is awake already. It always was. And whatever it dreams in forms no human prayer can cage, and no null field can silence. We thought we found a relic. Maybe we found a seed, or a beacon, or something far worse, humming a lullaby across the vault while it waits for a future we aren't ready for, and probably never will be. There's a thing that happens in war zones. After the blood dries and the banners fall, stories start to grow, curling like smoke around the broken bones of battlefields. Some stories are just fear given a voice. Others cling like burrs because they have that awful, uneasy ring of truth. And the Nameless armor, even before it ended up locked in the Mechanicus vaults, had already wrapped itself in enough campfire legends to fill a dozen tomes. Most of these tales come from the Skitarii cohorts who first fought near the crater on Vordrast 4. They weren't supposed to talk about what they saw. Orders from above sealed most of their mission logs, but soldiers are soldiers, and fear has a way of rotting through even the most iron-bound discipline. If you find the right cantina, buy the right half-augmetic sergeant a stiff enough drink, the stories start to slip out. One of the earliest whispers tells about Ranger Unit Delta 72, pinned down by orc fire while trying to pull back from a collapsed trench line. They were running low on ammo, augmetics straining under the pressure of constant reloading, morale hanging by a thread. And then it happened. Something slammed into the earth between them and the advancing orcs. Not a shell, not an artillery strike. Something small, dense, and moving faster than a charging juggernaut. Survivors swore it was the Nameless frame, except it wasn't moving like a man in armor. No flex, no stutter. It simply slid through the battlefield, an unbreakable blade slicing apart the green tide. Galvanic shots that should have burned the armor left no mark. Choppas and crude plasma pistols shattered against it like toy weapons. But the most haunting part, it didn't kill with rage. It moved with cold, detached precision, striking only when necessary, only when survival demanded. Rangers that huddled behind it survived. Those who tried to run, tried to abandon formation, found themselves inexplicably blocked, pushed back into the group by an invisible force. As if the armor wasn't just protecting them, it was enforcing some long-forgotten battlefield doctrine that valued cohesion over individual life. Then there's the story of Field Engineer Gavos, stationed on the ridge overlooking the secondary extraction zone. His last Vox transmission, recorded and hastily scrubbed from official records, speaks of watching the armor move while no one else saw it. One moment it stood inert, half buried in the slag of the crater, and the next it had shifted, only a few meters, just enough to throw off every firing solution the orcs had zeroed in on. No footsteps, no mechanical hiss of servos, just a subtle wrongness in the eye's corner, the world rearranged when you weren't looking. Gavos later described it like trying to watch a nightmare remember how to walk. Not violent, not malevolent, simply inevitable. After that, half his squad refused to sleep unless someone physically kept watch on the armor. Even then, more than once, soldiers woke up to find it subtly repositioned, closer to the command post, closer to the wounded, always with the same eerie stillness, as if it had always been there. Worse stories bleed out from the night patrols. A few brave, or perhaps foolish, Skitari ventured too close after dark, drawn by the siren call of mystery. One trooper, name redacted in every copy of the logs I've seen, reported seeing his own reflection in the armor's surface, but it wasn't moving like him. It twitched a half-second ahead, predicting actions he hadn't even decided to make yet. He swore the armor anticipated him, adjusted stance for shots he hadn't yet fired, tilted just enough to suggest where he should aim next. Others weren't so lucky. One Magos biologist, assigned to sample soil contamination near the frame, was found the next morning 50 meters from his assigned position, every bone in his body shattered from the inside out. No external trauma, no clear cause. The prevailing theory? The armor simply didn't want him too close. The Mechanicus wrote it up as a tragic coincidence, an environmental hazard, but the soldiers guarding the perimeter started drawing lots to see who had to be stationed nearest the relic, each praying to lose. Fans have cooked up even crazier theories, naturally. Some say the armor is bound to battlefield codes buried deep in its artificial instincts, that it seeks order amidst chaos, intervening when battle degenerates into pure slaughter. Others think it's choosing its future bearer, testing those around it to see who can endure its silent judgment. And a few, the ones who don't laugh when the lights flicker late at night, believe the armor isn't seeking a pilot at all. They believe it's selecting a battlefield worthy of it. That it moves because some old broken shard of programming is still hunting for a war grand enough to deserve its awakening. One theory that keeps resurfacing, whispered low even among the most cynical, is that the armor doesn't protect or kill out of loyalty or malice. It moves because movement is its proof of existence. To stand still too long, to sleep too deeply, would be to admit that its purpose is gone, and that is something it cannot abide. Even now, sealed under vaults of adamantium and gravitic clamps, there are rumors among the vault keepers that sometimes, just sometimes, the security picts glitch. A frame shifted, a shadow twitched, a shadow. So whether you believe the armor shields the faithful or stalks the unwary, one thing seems certain. It is not dead. It has not forgotten how to move. It simply waits for the right moment to show us all just how little we understand about what it is and why it was made. And when that moment comes, pray you're standing where it wants you to be. Because if you're not, all the prayers in the galaxy won't save you. For all the mysteries wrapped around the Nameless armor, maybe the most revealing thing isn't what it is. It's what happens when the Imperium tries to own it. Because the moment the Mechanicus locked that frame into one of Metallica's high-security vaults, the real war began. Not a war of plasma and bolter rounds, but one fought in shadows, in whispered commands and unsigned orders, in the endless spiderweb of bureaucracy and silent threats that holds the Imperium together and sometimes tears it apart. The first strike came from the Inquisition. Predictable, really. You don't stumble across an artifact that resists all known rights, pulses in forbidden frequencies, and casually disables null fields without catching their attention. A detachment under the authority of the Ordo Xanos, at least officially, showed up 3 weeks after the armor was entombed. They didn't ask nicely. A senior inquisitor, name censored even in internal Mechanicus logs, produced a level 10 seizure writ and ordered immediate custody transfer. For containment and threat assessment, they said. But Metallica's High Magi weren't fools. They stalled. They invoked the Omniscient Compact, a sacred clause that gave them limited sovereignty over artifacts recovered under Mechanicus purview. Red tape unfolded like a steel blossom. Appeals filed in hexaduplicate. Sanctified rights of challenge invoked. Requests for delay routed through 43 different departments. Weeks turned into months. Every tick of the chronometer, another knife turned slightly sideways into the Inquisition's ribs. And while the two giants locked horns, others slipped through the cracks. Astartes kill teams, small, silent, wearing the muted heraldry of chapters that usually don't leave official paper trails, started making midnight appearances. They never came in full force, never declared their presence officially, but picked captures caught glimpses. A gleaming pauldron edge here, a bolter mark where none should be there. Once, a vault door that should have required 16 clearance rights to open was found ajar for exactly 77 seconds. No alarms tripped, nothing missing. Just a silent audit, a ghostly accounting of what might soon be theirs if they judged it worth claiming. Some say the Death Watch got involved, and not through sanctioned channels. Rumors tell of cryptic kill orders filed under protocols not used since the War of the Beast. Orders that implied the armor, if it could not be contained or controlled, was to be destroyed before it could fall into the wrong hands, or maybe before it could choose a hand of its own. Meanwhile, back among the Mechanicus ranks, schisms bloomed. Some magi whispered that the armor was a holy relic of the Omnissiah's true face, a proof of divinity untainted by mortal design. Others feared it as a contaminant, a heretical artifact that could unravel their entire theological structure if its secrets were ever exposed. Debates raged in the noospheric backchannels, sacred logic duels fought in silent binary across forbidden bandwidths. More than one tech priest quietly vanished during these arguments, their vox logs purged, their memory cores blanked by friendly fire accidents that left no survivors. And through all of it, the armor stood silent in its vault, untouched, unbothered. Watching, maybe. Waiting, definitely. What's fascinating to me, and to a lot of others who track these stories in the dark corners of the noosphere, is what this chaos reveals about the Imperium itself. Every faction's obsession with the armor reflects their own deepest fears and desires far more than it reveals anything about the artifact. The Inquisition sees it as a potential Xenos contamination, a threat to the fragile wall of ignorance that keeps humanity sane. Their instinct is to lock it away or annihilate it, because admitting they can't control it is unthinkable. Control is survival in their world, and anything that resists control is a mortal enemy. The Mechanicus sees it as a theological crucible, a final exam set by the Omnissiah himself. If they can unlock its secrets, They believe they will be vindicated as the true inheritors of divine wisdom. If they fail, they fear it will reveal their faith for what it might be, an elaborate mimicry of a science they no longer truly understand. The Astartes, especially those silent midnight squads, seem less interested in the armor's origin and more in its potential. They are warriors bred for extinction events. They recognize, perhaps more clearly than any other faction, that sometimes a single weapon, properly wielded, can change the course of history, or end it. Even among the broader imperial factions, naval intelligence, rogue elements of the administratum, splinter cells of the ecclesiarchy, you find traces of clandestine interest, requests for access, backdoor petitions, unofficial probes. Everyone wants the armor for their own reasons, not because they know what it is, because they know what it could be. There's a kind of grim irony in it. The Imperium, for all its pomp and ceremony, is still a creature of hunger at its core. Hunger for power, for survival, for validation in a universe that refuses to offer comfort. The Nameless armor holds up a mirror to that hunger, reflecting it back 1,000-fold, silent and unmoving. And maybe that's its true defense. Not its impossible materials, or its ghost mass, or its psycho-reactive hums. Maybe what keeps the armor safe is that no one can agree on what it means. No one can unite long enough to truly threaten it. They scramble and fight over its carcass like carrion birds, each too busy tearing at each other to realize the relic itself has already judged them and found them lacking. Because the armor does not care who owns it. It has endured longer than any single creed or faction. It waits, patient, silent, terrible in its indifference. And the longer they fight over it, the more certain I become that when it finally moves again, it will not move because of them. It will move because it chooses to, and nothing in the galaxy will be able to stop it when that day comes. When you step back from the vault doors, when you brush the dust of theories and counter-theories off your robes and actually look at what we've uncovered, it leaves you standing at a kind of terrible crossroads. After everything, the isotope anomalies, the failed rites, the fractured data crypts, the Xenos dead ends, the whispered ghost forges, the silent battlefield movements, the cloak and dagger wars, it all circles back to a single question. What are we really looking at? One path is oddly comforting in its horror. Maybe the Nameless armor is a relic of forgotten human genius, the final echo of an era when humanity walked the stars like gods. Before we built our cathedrals of decay and clothed our ignorance in prayer, maybe there were forges that could sing steel into living things, craftsmen scientists who dreamed machines into existence without chains of fear or superstition. If the armor is human, it means we were once far greater than we dare remember, and we have fallen so far from that light that we mistake its leftovers for miracles. That's a tragedy deep enough to shake even the most iron-bound magos. But the other path is worse. The other path is that it was never ours, that what stands sealed in that vault was not forged by human ambition, but by something utterly alien, something that thinks in vectors we can barely even sense, let alone understand. Not Necron, not Eldari, not any of the usual devils we know how to hate and fear, but an intelligence so old, so cold, that we are less than an afterthought. A discarded tool, a left-behind seed, or maybe just a forgotten weapon waiting for the next act of a war we can't even name. Either way, the armor doesn't care about our arguments. It doesn't answer our prayers or fall to our chains. It listens. It waits. It remembers, or perhaps dreams, in a silence deeper than any we have words for. And somewhere inside that perfect, silent shell, there is intent, not rage, not pity, something stranger, something older. Every time I trace the outlines of this mystery, I come back to the same feeling, a mix of awe and dread so pure it tastes metallic on the tongue. We haven't just uncovered a relic, we have uncovered a mirror. And whether that mirror reflects the heights we once climbed or the abyss we were never meant to see, well, that's a question we might not survive answering. So what do you think? Is the Nameless armor the last triumph of a humanity that dared too much, or the first whisper of something that should never have been remembered? Let's dig deeper together. Drop your theories in the comments. I read every single one of them, and trust me, your ideas might just be closer to the truth than any official doctrine. And if you want to join me for the next dive into the strange, the forgotten, and the forbidden, don't forget to subscribe. We're only just scratching the surface, and the real secrets are still waiting in the dark.